Hello and welcome back. I know I said I was going to start doing more horror anthologies, but 2022's Smile, along with a few other great horror movies, are still on my list. I'll still be doing videos like this for films from time to time, but not as frequently. Smile and its sequel are modern horror at its finest. The grim moments of fear are interlaced with disturbing dream sequences, making for a horror story that really sticks with you. And during each volley of terror, you have to stop and ask yourself, is what you're seeing really happening to the character, or is it just another dream? I love that there are certain scenes where you expect the character to jolt up in bed, but it never happens. Like the infamous birthday scene. The first time I saw this movie, you keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, expecting it to be a nightmare, only for the scene to continue and linger for an uncomfortable amount of time, letting the terror not just fester, but take a seat and get comfy. To me, that's the beauty of this movie. It plays with you in a deeply disturbing way. But as always, I'm going to recap the story while pausing at certain points to share behind-the-scenes info and fun facts. As always, I highly recommend you watch this movie in full for yourself before watching this video. Also, as always, I put links in the description to make it easy to rent or buy. But with all that out of the way, let's talk about 2022's Smile. Our story starts off with Dr. Rose Cotter, a clinical psychiatrist working in a hospital emergency psychiatric unit. Dr. Morgan Desai asks about a patient referral she made that didn't have medical insurance. Rose seems to be an adamant professional that cares about her patients, as she argues with Dr. Desai that the medical board should be more for helping sick people than lining their own pockets. Desai agrees, but just asks that she gives him more of a warning in the future. After discovering that Rose has been working since last night, he advises that she head home and get some sleep. Rose appears to agree and grabs her coat and heads home. However, she hears her phone ringing, and she rushes back to her office to answer, unknowingly setting the grim wheels of fate in motion. Her seemingly good action of taking on just one more patient is the harbinger of things to come. As Rose walks to the office to meet the patient named Laura Weaver, a nurse fills her in on Laura's background. She's a grad student who was found in public causing a major disturbance, and the EMS decided to bring her in based on the things she was saying. The nurse makes note that she's had another run-in with police about a week prior. A professor at her college bludgeoned himself to death with a hammer, and Laura was the sole witness. Rose enters the room to find Laura cowering in the corner. She introduces herself and coaxes Laura into taking a seat. Laura, shaking, says that she's seeing something, but this thing that she's seeing, it looks human but isn't. It sometimes takes the form of random people, sometimes people she knows and trusts. It even appears to her as relatives that have passed away. However, no matter what the person is, they all have one striking attribute. They're all smiling. Not a sweet, warm smile, a cold, dead-eyed, soulless smile. Rose tries to explain that when our minds are overwhelmed, it fills the void with horrific and horrible imagery. Laura looks away, unable to find the words to explain it any better. Rose asks her to look back at her, but when Laura does, she screams and tumbles back in her chair, horrified by something unseen to Rose. Laura thrashes on the floor and begins choking, almost as if she's having a seizure. Rose rushes to the corner of the room and grabs the emergency phone, calling for hospital orderlies to come help Laura. When Rose turns back around, Laura is no longer thrashing on the floor. She's now standing across from her, completely still, with this creepy, unblinking smile stretched across her face. Rose notices the piece of broken vase in Laura's hand and tries to talk her out of whatever she thinks Laura is about to do, assuming she's about to attack. But due to YouTube's guidelines, my description of what happens next is limited. So instead of saying exactly what Laura does next, I'll just say she gives herself a level 5 paper cut. And she seems disturbingly pleased with herself as the cherry juice starts to pool. Rose, traumatized by what she has just seen, stands there in shock as the orderlies intervene to help Laura. Later, Rose is seen sitting alone replaying the events in her mind as Dr. Desai speaks with the police. Rose talks with Detective Buckley and Joel and explains the events that happened. We see Laura died from her level 5 paper cut, and the sheet over her in the morgue looks like a smile. This moment in the story is the first major shock. Laura, a seemingly vulnerable patient, takes her own life in front of Rose. It's a pivotal point because it forces the audience and Rose herself to confront the limits of what she can control and predict. In horror storytelling, a scene like this is often called a horrific turning point, the event that makes the supernatural threat tangible and immediate. It moves the story from psychological hints to outright terror. Interestingly, filmmakers often draw inspiration from real-life cases to make such scenes feel more grounded. The way the story portrays Laura's psychological collapse mirrors documented accounts of extreme mental distress. In films, these moments are amplified with camera angles, sound cues, and pacing to create tension, without relying solely on graphic imagery. It's a careful balance of implication and suggestion. This scene also connects to the 2020 short film Laura Isn't Sleeping, which explores similar themes of psychological breakdown and hallucinations in a confined, suspenseful setting. Both works play with the idea that what the mind perceives can be as terrifying as any physical threat. By referencing real-world mental health phenomena and creative works inspired by them, you can show viewers how horror often blends fact and fiction to heighten fear. Finally, this moment sets up Rose's story arc. It's no longer just about helping a patient, it becomes personal. The shock and trauma she experiences here ripple throughout the rest of the story. This first shock hooks the audience emotionally, making Rose's journey much more compelling and tragic. Rose returns home and tries to relax, but notices speckles of cherry juice on her blouse. She takes a shower and commits to her inner Jack Sparrow, drinking alcohol to help her relax. But she notices things are quiet, a little too quiet. Feeling that something is not quite right, she sees a smiling figure in the corner of her kitchen, only for her boyfriend Trevor to turn on the light and startle her into dropping her glass. Trevor comforts her and asks if they should cancel their dinner plans, but Rose refuses. She spends the entire night lost in her own mind as her sister Holly rambles. Holly reinvites her to her son's 7th birthday party, but Rose says she has to work. Holly brings up their parents' old house, and Greg suggests tearing it down. Rose shoots the idea down, with my favorite words to use in any social gathering.
Can you guys just shut the fuck up?
Later that night, Trevor and Rose return home, with their little cat greeting them. Rose scoops cat food into a bowl as Trevor asks if she's okay. She assures him she is, feeding their cat. The next day at work, lost in her own world, Rose makes coffee and asks the nurse to get her the incident report from the police of Laura witnessing the professor play a deadly game of whack-a-mole on himself. Joel returns and we learn that the two of them used to date. He didn't know she was involved until after he got there. She's understanding and tells him not to worry about it. Joel checks on her, showing concern, but Rose is standoffish. She says she has to tend to her patients. The nurse reminds Joel that she is engaged. Joel responds, "I know." The nurse gives him a look, but he just smirks back. Rose walks through the halls of the hospital, noticing her patient Carl sitting on the edge of his bed, smiling. She asks how he's feeling, but he gives her nothing but a creepy grin in return. She tries to get a response, but Carl threatens her multiple times, slowly walking toward her, continuing to repeat that she'll die, louder and louder, slowly forcing her to back out of the room, causing Rose to yell for the orderly's help. When they arrive, they find Carl asleep in bed, but they drag him to the floor and restrain him anyway. Rose watches in disbelief, confused by Carl's transition from the doorway to comfortably sleeping in bed. Carl, now restrained and confused, screams, wondering what he did wrong. Later, Rose discusses the incident with Dr. Desai. She claims that Carl was aggressive, but Desai states that Carl has been in and out of their care for years and has never before shown any signs of aggression. Despite Desai's reassurance, Rose insists Carl was threatening her. Desai reminds her about the traumatic experience she went through recently. He tells her that she needs time off to recover, stating that she's been working 80-hour weeks for months and needs to prioritize her mental health if she wants to help others. He insists it's not an option. She needs to go home and rest for a week before returning refreshed. Rose reluctantly leaves the hospital, questioning her own sanity as she heads for her car. She starts a calming breathing exercise and decides to attend her nephew's birthday party, since she won't be working. Stopping at a toy shop, she buys a toy train set as a gift. Back at home, she sits alone, wrapping the present while texting her boyfriend Trevor, asking if he'll be home soon, but he replies that he's stuck at work and will be late. Rose pours a glass of wine, taking a single sip before being startled by the sound of her home alarm. She checks the front door, finding it locked, so she dismisses the alarm. Suddenly, the phone rings and the security company asks if she's okay. She explains that she's fine, but her back door is open. The operator then asks if she's alone. Rose answers yes, but in response, the operator says 3 chilling words.
Are you sure?
The operator follows up with 3 even creepier words.
Look behind you.
Startled, Rose slowly turns around, only to be jump-scared by the ringing phone again. She looks at the phone, seeing it still hanging on the receiver. Confused, she glances down at her empty hand that was once holding the phone. She cautiously answers the phone once more, only to hear the operator asking for her name and password. Fearful, Rose requests a police response. The police clear the house, assuring her that false alarms happen often. As they leave, Rose's boyfriend Trevor arrives. Inside the house, they talk while she prepares her cat's food. Her cat doesn't come to eat, though. Trevor inquires about the security alarm, and Rose explains she must have accidentally activated it. Trevor questions how someone can mistakenly turn on the alarm. Rose attributes her absent-mindedness to the traumatic experience with Laura, stating she might have activated it unknowingly. She reassures Trevor that everything is fine. Rose asks Trevor for help in finding their cat, but he notices something else instead.
Rose, did you break another glass?
She calls out to the cat, mentioning it's time for dinner, even leaving the food dish outside after the back door was found open. That night, a nightmare about finding her deceased mother haunts her, preventing sleep. Unable to rest, Rose reviews the recording of her session with Laura. Rose keeps listening to the recording repeatedly, convinced she hears a soft whisper of her name in the background. She works to enhance the audio but finds nothing. Raising the volume, she suddenly hears her mother's loud voice scream her name right next to her. Startled, Rose falls out of the chair and onto the floor, quickly grabbing a knife in fear. Trevor rushes in, finding her terrified in the corner, knife in hand. The following morning, Rose visits a psychiatrist, describing her situation. The doctor theorizes it may be a manifestation of her childhood trauma from discovering her mother's body. Rose requests a prescription for Risperdal, an antipsychotic medication. The doctor looks surprised, and Rose explains she's been experiencing hallucinations since her session with Laura. She reasons that the antipsychotic could help alleviate the hallucinations. The doctor declines her request for medication, proposing they discuss the issue further during a follow-up appointment next week. She encourages Rose to contact her if needed. Disappointed, Rose prepares for her nephew's birthday party. After singing "Happy Birthday," they open presents. Excitedly, her nephew unwraps Rose's gift, but finds her dead cat in the box instead. The room falls silent, and shock spreads among the guests. The party guests look on in horror, assuming she's having a psychotic episode. Rose denies through tears that she didn't put the cat in the box. She begins hyperventilating, trying to convince the house full of onlookers that she isn't crazy. She sees a mysterious smiling woman in the corner, causing her to stumble back and go ass over tea kettle into a coffee table.
This marks the milestone where the horror begins to invade her personal space and even her family life. She starts noticing strange figures, the smiling woman in the corner, and even small disturbances like spilling wine or her missing cat. This is classic home and family horror, a subgenre of horror where familiar, safe spaces and loved ones become corrupted. It's a highly effective technique because it makes the audience feel like there's no safe place to hide and no safe person to turn to. Sosie Bacon said one major draw to the role of Rose is that she wasn't a stereotypical horror victim. She's a fully realized and fleshed out person. She said that the script was an exciting prospect to play such a fully realized character with a heavy past, not only under the surface, but one that we, the viewers, not only get to see it, but have to face alongside her. And with legendary actors as her real-life parents, Kevin Bacon and Kyra Sedgwick, you can say acting runs in her blood. She, like all horror fans, loved and appreciated working on a horror film that used practical effects instead of solely depending on CGI. She explained that having real physical effects on set made a huge difference, saying that there was always something to react to, which gave her what she needed to give her best for each and every take.
At the ER, doctors examine her, and Dr. Desai expresses concern, suggesting she see a mental health specialist. Rose, still shaken, watches as Holly and Trevor argue just outside her room. Trevor drives Rose home, and during the trip, she reveals her experiences with Laura, the hallucinations and visions. Trevor tries to exit the car, but Rose locks the door, insisting he listen. She shares that all the events Laura described are now happening to her, and fears something bad is approaching. Desperate, Rose pleads for Trevor's belief, but he dismisses her claims, stating that he won't believe in her ghost stories. Trevor and Rose have a heated argument outside their home. Trevor suggests mental illness runs in her family, possibly inherited from her mother. Trevor then accuses her of killing their cat, but Rose vehemently denies it. Trevor remains skeptical and chooses to sleep on the couch, fearful of Rose's actions. Disheartened, Rose turns to her computer to research the professor, who bludgeoned himself in front of Laura. Rose hears her mother's voice whispering from the hallway, urging her to follow. She ignores the voice, extinguishing the lights and closing her eyes to sleep. In the darkness, she glimpses a dark vision of her mother standing in the doorway, leaving her terrified and whimpering. Rose visits the professor's wife, Victoria, describing how her husband was slowly succumbing to madness, plagued by sleeplessness and self-conversations. Victoria says that all she has left after their years of marriage is haunting, lingering questions and the memory of his disfigured corpse, from when she had to identify him at the morgue. Rose questions Victoria about whether her husband mentioned what he witnessed, and Victoria offers to show her the room filled with eerie paintings. According to Victoria, her husband drastically changed after being the sole witness of a woman game-overing herself in an elevator at a conference 4 days before his death. Rose connects the dots with a chilling realization that the demon's transfer method seems to involve sewer sliding oneself in front of a solo witness, the same way Laura did to her a few days prior. This revelation leaves her both shocked and unsettled, further confirming the terrifying truth that she is now the next target for the demonic forces. After persistently asking distressing questions, Victoria loses her composure and screams at Rose to leave her house. Feeling desperate and having exhausted all other options, Rose approaches Joel for support. She confides in him about the eerie events unfolding. Joel, determined to help, meticulously researches the connections linking the string of deaths to sewer slides. As Joel studies the evidence, he starts to believe Rose's story. He prints out the documents before she goes to visit her sister. Their conversation is strained, focusing on their mother and the disturbing events at the birthday party. Frustrated, Holly storms indoors, weary of Rose's increasingly severe paranoid delusions. As Rose is about to leave, Holly returns to the car and approaches the driver's side window. Holly knocks to get Rose's attention. Rose looks over, only for Holly's contorted head to drop into view, smiling at Rose. Her nephew Jackson watches from the window as Rose screams manically in her car at what seems to be nothing. Later that night, Rose eats in her car as Joel calls. He says he linked what's happening to her to over 20 different cases, leading back to one person that seemingly broke the cycle, named Robert Talley. He's currently being held upstate on murder charges. It's revealed that 4 days after witnessing a sewer slide, he killed some woman out of the blue, only for the sole witness of that killing to also commit a sewer slide 4 days following that incident in front of yet another person, passing the curse on. Joel and Rose talk in the car as they drive, the two slowly mapping out the timeline of events leading from one victim to the next. They intend to talk to Talley to find out what he knows.
Don't forget to bring a towel!
Joel is having a hard time wrapping his head around it all, but after putting together all the facts, no matter how impossible, whatever remains, no matter how improbable, must be the truth. Joel elects to help Rose. Rose talks with Talley as Joel watches from the background. She explains her situation in the third person, acting as if it's happening to one of her patients rather than her. She says that only Talley can help her, and that she needs to know how he escaped it. Talley agrees under the condition that the cop leaves, referring to Joel. Joel reluctantly goes, and Talley continues, saying that he researched everything he could. He says the only person who survived before him was a man in Brazil who was cursed and game-overed, a man in front of his wife to pass on the trauma. Talley says that's the only way to escape it. Game over someone in front of someone else and pass it on, or become a victim. Rose screams out that she can't kill someone, letting it slip that she's the one carrying the curse. Tally freaks out and screams for her to get away from him, and that she's not passing it back to him. He screams louder, pulling against his cuffs. The guards come in and restrain him. Rose leaves and Joel asks what he said. Rose dismisses him and says that he said nothing and that he's crazy. They drive back in silence, Joel knowing that she's keeping something from him.
One standout at this point in the movie is Kyle Gallner, who has a solid background in horror and thrillers. Before Smile, he appeared in films like Jennifer's Body, The Haunting in Connecticut, and the 2010 remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. You can say Gallner was more than up to the task as Joel, and it's because of that history which likely helped him portray Joel's descent realistically, from normal cop to being dragged into such a horrific set of circumstances. And a slight spoiler here, a lot of Smile fans, myself included, were upset that the sequel shifted the focus away from Joel and onto a whole new set of characters. In a sense, the sequel made Joel into nothing more than a transitional character between films rather than a long-term lead, something that I and many fans believed he earned. I liked the sequel, but having Joel be the lead character of the story would have made it more interesting in my opinion. Director Parker Finn said that when planning Smile 2, he strongly considered having Joel as the main character, but ultimately decided against it, saying it was simply because he didn't want to do the thing everyone expected. So that's the second awesome Joel we lost in a good story due to the writer being an ass.
Joel, get up. Joel, fucking get up.
Later, while home alone, Rose comes to grips with the fact that she has to kill in order not to become a victim herself. She's about to grab a knife and come up with a plan on the fly, but a knock at the door snaps her out of it. It's her psychiatrist paying her a home visit. Rose is reluctant to let her in, but the doctor says she has to do a wellness check, and if she refuses, she'll have to call the police. Rose lets her in. The two talk, and the doctor asks how things are going. Rose lays it all out, but a phone call breaks their conversation. Rose answers the phone, only for it to be her psychiatric doctor on the other end. Faced with the impossibility of her doctor being in two places at once, the imposter doctor smiles creepily at her, cornering her and grabbing her by the face, saying that it's almost time. Drooling as the being, pretending to be the doctor, continues to smile. Some time passes and Rose returns to her work, concealing a knife in her sleeve. She goes to her floor and tries to find a victim on which to sacrifice. She comes to Carl's room. He seems afraid of her. He screams and Dr. Desai enters the room to confront her. She stabs Carl over and over, but it seems to have no effect, while Dr. Desai screams in the corner, peeling off his own face like a mask. But it turns out this is just a vivid nightmare. Rose awakes and screams in her car, only for Dr. Desai to knock on her car window, startling her. He tries to get her to talk, but Rose says she needs to be alone. Desai notices the knife in Rose's passenger seat. Desai tries to get her to stop, but she speeds off instead. As she speeds to her family's abandoned cabin, Joel calls her and says that an all-points bulletin was issued for her, and that she's labeled as a dangerous person. She tells Joel that if she's alone, the curse can't pass on to anyone. Joel says he's coming to help her and for her to just wait, but she continues driving, pulling up to the abandoned house and leaving her phone in the car. She walks inside, confronting the demons of her past. Hearing her mother wailing behind a closed door, Rose turns the doorknob and opens the door to confront the spirit of her mother, explaining that she's been carrying the guilt of her death for her entire life. Rose says she has to let it go. Her mother says that she won't let her, and Rose says this isn't real. But the entity wearing the mask of her mother says that her mind makes it real. Rose asks why it's doing this, and the demon says her mind makes it so inviting. Rose runs to the living room, only to be attacked by the monster once again. She fights it off with the knowledge that the being is trapped inside her mind, and she's capable of fighting it off. She breaks the monster's arm and hits it in the face with a lantern, setting the demon ablaze and causing the house to burn along with it. Rose watches as the house goes up in flames, resulting in the monster being defeated. She drives to Joel's house, convinced that the nightmare is over. As she talks with Joel, the apartment grows dark as a grin crawls across Joel's face. Rose runs out the front door, only to run into the yard of the abandoned house. She turns around to find the house still standing and unburned. She looks over to see Joel yelling out to her. Rose screams and runs into the house, locking the door. Joel tries to get in through the locked door, but Rose won't let him. Rose is attacked by the monster once more. She screams in terror, prompting Joel to try and bash the door in. The monster rips off its face to reveal its true form, a grotesque creature with a multitude of smiling grins lining its face. It stares at her with black sunken eyes. Joel kicks in the door, only to find the house seemingly empty and quiet. He turns on his flashlight, and it's bright enough to illuminate the kitchen, where Rose is standing in the darkness, and she's dousing herself in the fuel. Tossing the empty fuel canister on the ground, she turns to face Joel. She looks at Joel with a wide grin before striking a match and passes the demon's curse onto another soul, before the screen fades to black. When it comes to the ending, it's a masterclass in modern horror. Rose passes the curse to another soul, leaving the story with an unsettling, ambiguous ending, a common horror device. They prevent closure and keep the audience on edge long after the credits roll. This technique is used almost to a trope-like level in horror movies, but with Smile, instead of letting it linger for too long, Smile 2 picks up mere days after this movie ends. But the closing moments also carry some heavy symbolic weight. The passing of the curse represents trauma that can't be entirely escaped. Either you pass it on or become its victim yourself, placing normal people in a situation where they must do things they'd never do otherwise. The ramifications make us as the viewer question, which would I do in this situation? As with Rose, you can't just keep away from people. The entity will lure others or control you to make you do the horrible act in front of someone to pass itself on. The only way out would be to ride the sewer slide on your own, not around others. But that leaves the haunting question. Would the curse pass on when the person finds your remains, or does the act need to be witnessed? The rules of the movie are close enough to force the character's hands, but open enough for viewers to question it. With the creature taking over your mind, you'd never be 100% sure of what you're doing. How can you be sure you're alone, or know if the person you're talking to is really that person, or if what you're doing are really the actions you think they are? I gotta say, this is a good horror movie, but having to dodge around certain words in this video was challenging. I want to do part 2, but that's a challenge for another day. That's all I have for you in this video. Take care, have a great week, stay safe. Oh, and don't forget to smile.